How do you best serve the homeless population when people are addicted to drugs, they are out of their minds, and they're actually making decisions that are going to lead to death and destruction? Welcome to the program today. My name is Richard Markosian. I'm the host of the Utah Stories podcast. A very exciting guest on the program today by the name of James Behunin. We delve into the problem of how do you restore an addicted person to drugs. For years now, we believe that the best solution is the most compassionate solution, which is housing first. The idea is you get somebody into housing first, then they can work on their problems later. The problem is nobody wants to work on their problems later. If they're comfortable and they're drug addicted, very often they stay comfortable and they stay drug addicted. What is the state of Utah doing with all of our taxpayer dollars that are going into these failed homeless programs that, with all the best intentions of all the people working in these industries, are completely failing? So it was brought to my attention just a month ago that 20 people have died in the Magnolia apartments since they opened. This is not according to the police reports. This is not according to the people running the Magnolia. This is according to the tenants who live there. I had an exclusive interview with 4 tenants who live inside the Magnolia apartments, and these are the stories of what they told me. Kelly Johnson, who's been living at Magnolia for 4 years, told me that one man um, systematically premeditated a murder there. She told me that sex trafficking occurs regularly there, drug trafficking occurs, and people are dying all of the time. Is this true? Is it factual? Well, the road home will not speak to me, but one man who was willing to speak to me is James Behunin, who serves on the Utah Homeless Services Board. He was courageous enough to come on this program and address the problems in the homeless sector when very few are willing to talk about these problems. So without further ado, my interview with James Behunin. I believe that it sounds great to provide housing first. It sounds like the most compassionate solution, but does that mean it's the right solution to get people to transform their lives? Could it be that this is just not right? We should be sending more people to prison or jail.
I don't think we give them a choice. I think we say, you've got an illness. You've got, and it is an illness. You've got a substance abuse disorder, and you need to get it treated. And living on the street with that disorder is going to lead to your untimely death. And so, in effect, you're committing suicide by doing this. Now, you mentioned some that get off. We've noticed that in some of these areas, you can age out. That maybe living on the street when you're 25 and 30 is maybe what you want to do. But then you get to be 40 or 45, and life on the street can be pretty hard. And we've seen that there's a population that they just age out. They say, I just can't live this way anymore.
It ages you quickly.
It does.
People at 45. Kelly is not, I think she's just barely 50.
Yeah.
She's had a really hard life.
And you look at them and say, wow, you've had a hard life. And the time on the street is affecting your health. And they realize that when they get into their 40s and say, well, I need to do something different.
Yeah.
The sad thing is if you've been on meth or heroin for 10 or 15 years, or even marijuana, it can slow your cognitive abilities and make it difficult to get a job.
Yeah.
So,
any more comments?
Yes. Pink Mama's Addiction says, I was tired of having to struggle and dealing with the trauma and abuse of the streets. So yes, it was rock bottom and I'm grateful I hit it. She answers the question that you asked.
Yeah, appreciate that.
But there's also...
So what do you believe Pink Mama's addiction is the solution, would be my next question. Do you think we should move away from permanent supportive housing, um, get people into job programs, more recovery programs that are not necessarily attached to housing? I, I can't claim I have all the solutions, but I've had a lot of folks from TOSA on this program, the Other Side Academy and the Other Side Village, and I love that program because I do believe idleness is the devil's playground. You give somebody an apartment and you don't give them a job, that time on their hands to
Yeah.
just simply recover
You have a
can be
comment.
destructive if
Yeah.
if they don't have something to
Work is therapy.
Yeah. And peer-to-peer contact is absolutely essential.
Well, imagine being part of a moving company and being a part of a team where you have to work with one another, depend on each other to do a job, and it builds a sense of community and responsibility and
And
fulfillment.
therapeutic community feels a whole lot better than therapist, um, either victim or drug addict. It's just like you're among your peers who you're all
Yeah.
working together, encouraging each other to do better, to improve. And these people who've come out of TOSA after 3 years, Dylan and Jordan and Tiffany and Jackie, who we've had on, it's just amazing how energized these people are about life. They're just excited.
Oh yeah.
You have a comment on TOSA? Well, Rachel says this population would get kicked out of the Other Side Academy and switch point. So what happens then?
They wouldn't be necessarily kicked out, but they probably wouldn't be accepted if they have mental health issues. I know TOSA does not accept people with extreme mental health, anybody taking meds for mental health.
That's correct.
But the Other Side Village, on the other hand, takes people who've been chronically homeless and puts them through a prep school, takes them through a detox,
Yeah.
and then they have the opportunity to get a job at the Other Side Donuts or work on the premises. So there's two different models there. But do you think that there are people who are just too far gone with drugs and addiction to be able to really do anything?
Well,
Yeah.
let me tell you about a woman I met in St. George. She'd been on the street for 9 years. And she looked 20 years older than her real age. But they got her into one of these programs, and they have a thrift store there. And she worked at the thrift store and started to, get some responsibility, got off the drugs. And then they had her working in an administrative, janitorial kind of, in an administrative office and doing some tasks there. And the counselor that was working with her said her kids came to the staff there and said, "What did you do to our mother? This is amazing. You've and she had a little apartment. She loved nothing more than taking her teeny tiny paycheck and going and buying gifts for her grandchildren. But she had a Section 8 housing, which is, federal subsidized housing, which is all she needed to get this little apartment, plus the little paycheck she was getting from the odd work she was doing.
Mhm.
But she was not really clear thinking. She was not at a, probably the mental state I imagine she had, 30 years ago. She was definitely suffering the effects of being on the street and
But she
having
could
used
do
drugs.
something.
But she was doing something.
Yeah, she had something to do.
And her life was about as good as it could be for her.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's an example of someone who we've got as far as she could go.
Mhm.
And there may be some who are even worse off than her, whose mental state is in. I'm not an expert in mental health or mental illness, but I've seen a woman out there on the street just babbling to herself with a shopping cart piled up with blankets and other things she's collected, and just seems like she's incoherent. I'm thinking, I don't know that I'm going to be able to help her get independent and living in an apartment by herself. And
Well, the one that I had on the program that was most incredible to me, Jackie Tress from the Other Side Village. She looked about as bad as you can look. No teeth, sunken, hollow cheeks, scars, marks all over her face. She looked like she was at death's door. And she somehow had this sort of calling that she had to do Other Side Academy. She just had this pull there. And she got on the bench. She said she doesn't know how or why she felt that, but she completely transformed. Anybody watching who wants to see an inspirational story, go watch Jackie Tress, because she honestly, the way she looked in that mugshot, you would think she'd have a month to live. And she's now a really vibrant,
So
charismatic
they will
person.
surprise us.
It was amazing.
They will surprise us. Some of these folks, when given a chance, will make an amazing recovery. Now, having spoken with Mike Schultz about this, our speaker, he acknowledges that there's gonna be a population that we are just not going to be able to get, completely recovered and back on their feet. And we need to carve out a space for people who are just
low functioning.
Low functioning, that's a good way to put it. And we need to have that kind of facility.
Yeah.
But it's got to be a place where there is some structure and some expectations, and we protect them from the drug dealers and those who might want to take advantage of them. And so it's got to be kind of a group environment.
You got another question?
I'm not too sure, but this might be Wendy Vandemus. I'm not sure again. I'm just guessing because she says, Richard, I respect and like Jim, but I'd love to do a panel discussion with him so we can debate some of these complex issues.
I agree. It's probably about time for another panel discussion. We did that with mostly TOSA folks, and we did one with Wendy, and it was awesome. And the woman who runs Mental Health America, Utah, and we structured a panel where we had all those who were advocating the far more compassionate approach to solving homelessness, and then we had a panel of those who were advocating the far more accountable, personal accountability approach.
Yeah.
Because they are pretty distinct camps and they don't necessarily get along. And the folks who advocate a higher degree of compassion, I don't discredit them. I don't say, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Because you should be compassionate to the people. But if the objective is always to get people to not die, you can't have too much compassion.
Well, I don't know if you have kids, but is it compassionate to just let your kids eat anything they want and to do anything they want?
Or to beat the crap out of each other?
Yeah. Is that compassion? I think the challenge, and the analogy of kids really works well. Some kids you need to treat differently than other kids, just based on their mental stage or where they are in life. And so there's no easy answers.
Yeah.
And I would say, there are some people.
Rena Rogers. Yeah. So thank you, Wendy, for bringing that name up. Rena Rogers of Mental Health America, Utah. She has got some great things to say. And I thought that she was supposed to be working with the Magnolia and their tenants there in working with their psychological disorders, but I was not hearing any of that from in the last year.
Well, I think what you need to do is get someone from the Magnolia or the Road Home to come in and talk about it.
And I do. I wanted to break this story with you because I believe the way I've been portrayed, unfortunately, by the Road Home is somebody who wants to paint them with a bunch of yellow journalism or, somehow condemn them or say that they're terrible. So I've reached out 3 times. I left a message to Michelle Flynn on the phone. I sent 2 emails, one to Kat, one to Michelle, giving them every opportunity to come join us here today, provide their side. I'd still love to talk to them because the one thing that I think I didn't understand when I first started covering this issue that Paul Webster explained, who was this brief time the executive director of Solutions Utah, is, according to what he said, the federal grant for permanent supportive housing is written in a way where they literally cannot kick out a person for their disorder. And if their disorder is drug addiction, then they cannot kick them out for using drugs. I kind of find that almost impossible to believe.
I have heard that. I have a hard time going against what Paul says because he's more of an
high up.
expert on this.
Yeah.
He's more tied into the federal programs. But it seems to me if you've done something illegal,
State law
your
supersedes.
your own rule, in-house rules, don't apply. You call the police and you deal with it like you would any other criminal activity.
Yeah, but if that is somewhat true or it is true, I kind of understand how incredibly difficult it would be for Michelle Flynn to operate that facility.
I can't criticize any organization that is trying to serve this population.
And I'm sure they have the very best of intentions. And
I do have a beef with the Housing First as it is being implemented in Utah. I just think it's good for us all to keep talking about this and finding solutions. I've been in working in the public sector for my whole career. I've dealt with every kind of public problem you can imagine. I've been a mayor, a council member in my community, and working for the legislature. This is clearly the hardest public problem that I've ever had to deal with.
yeah.
There are no easy answers. And so to say, well, this organization is doing it wrong, that's just not fair because this is such a hard problem.
Well, especially when, with all respect, the policymakers don't have the lived experience. Like if you're making public policy and you want to come up with the best policy, of course you're going to think, let's go with the most compassionate solution. And with what I asked like Dave DeRocher and Mo Egan last time I talked to him, why aren't you guys with lived experience, you've been drug addicts, you've been homeless, getting invited to help write policy? And I think it was just this last legislative session they were invited in to the committee hearing concerning.
Actually, we changed I helped with the drafting of the legislation of the bill this year. And we made a modification to the makeup of the state board. And we pulled one of the public sector representatives out and replaced that position with a person with lived experience.
Oh, did you?
So we will soon, probably in June, or when the law takes effect, we will start to have a person on our board who represents that community,
Good.
who's been there.
Yeah.
And the rest of us, I don't know that, well, most of us have had firsthand experience with a family member or someone in our home I've had people in my home who've been homeless. Most of us have a connection to someone who's been a drug addict or homeless or somewhat involved in this community. But to have someone who's actually been on the street, that's new to our board.
I think that would be great.
commented on what juice.
Okay, so okay, so Wendy says the reason they go on the side of compassion is because otherwise I fear we'll lose them on the street without even trying to help. And I agree. If you see somebody on the street, I made this comment in an Instagram post, you should always assume they're homeless for lack of resources, not for being a drug addict, and help them out. I think people need help, and whether they're on the street and they're sort of ranting and raving and they appear to be possibly on drugs, or it's just a major psychological disorder, everybody who's on the streets should get help. But eventually you need, I think, like Pink Mama's Addiction said, you need to help people reach a rock bottom where they're thirsty, as you put it.
Yeah.
And how you write public policy to favor that set of circumstances over a soft, cushy landing that's basically a slow suicide. I mean, you feel like you're on the right track now with the legislature and the legislation being.
No, we are still struggling to find a solution. We don't have the outcome measures we would like to see. We have one thing that we think can address this is we are looking for land. We think we may have it for what we're going to call a transformative campus. It's patterned after something we've seen in San Antonio, the Haven for Hope, the Nevada Cares facility in Reno. And I understand that there's a similar transformative kind of campus in Las Vegas that they're just starting to conceive. And we hope to have this up in the next couple of years, a place where you can have the low barrier shelter so nobody has a reason to be on the street. And then we have mini shelters that they can progress to on the site. And then I don't know
Progress
what,
by
a
being clean?
progressive,
That-
yes, a progressive
Yeah.
kind of environment. So if you want to get a case manager and get some help, we'll get you into a tiny home or a mini shelter or whatever. And as you advance in your rehabilitation, we'll get you into progressively better facilities.
That'd be great.
We think that could work. Now, here's the problem. It's going to cost us $25 million to operate this facility. We have enough money to buy the land and do some improvements. But to get the case management and the services, there's maintenance and laundry and security and all these other things and services. The drug addiction service.
$25 million per year.
We're probably going to need
Just for
25.
that.
Well, they're saying the facility in San Antonio is more like a $31 million operating budget. If we can get it down to 25, that'd be great. Now, I've been probing with legislators and say, so what do you think? Can we budget the 25 million? And they're saying, well, we're not sure you don't have the money in other areas already that you could repurpose for that. And so we're going through that exercise of saying, well, what money could we repurpose to put towards the campus? The thing is, the challenge I see, there's these folks that say, well, we just need more money. And the answer to every homeless problem is always, well, let's just build more magnolias. Let's get more magnolias. If we had 10 more magnolias and more services, we'd have this problem solved. Well, then you got the other side that say, well, we see you put these folks into all kinds of different programs and they don't work. They're back on the street. And so until
how can you prove that supply doesn't create the demand?
Yeah. Well,
It's the greater supply of homeless housing, the more demand for
yeah.
housing.
And so, will you ever build enough housing for these folks? And at the cost of the Magnolia units, this is the point I keep bringing up is they're now saying that we're probably going to spend like $330,000 per unit. Well, we've probably got 12 to 1,400 people in Salt Lake County that need this. And so where are you going to come up with $500 million to meet that need? If that's the price point, $330,000.
And why not take those the Magnolia apartments, rent them out, and give everybody who's just trying to stay clean and sober a place in, sorry to everyone in Tooele, but it's cheaper real estate. It's going to be a lot.
Yeah, we brought that up too. But do you need an apartment to recover?
No, you don't need an apartment.
Can you get treatment? Can you get treatment in a better, in a lower cost environment, in a mini shelter or a tiny home?
Yeah.
And so we're exploring those options.
Yeah. Well, with the 10 minutes we have left, I want to play just a little bit more of Kelly's interview. This interview went pretty long with her because she had a lot to say, and then another gentleman I spoke to after. Was that true?
Yeah, okay, so all the workers, this is how I take it. All the workers here are like recovering addicts, and that's how they get the job here. But that shouldn't be teaching them they have these vapes, and I know they're marijuana vapes but they always take breaks and lots of breaks all the time. The ones that work in the morning. Yeah. They always take breaks, and they're always talking to the case managers and just bullshitting out here in front. It's like, you aren't supposed to be doing something, watching the cameras or something, you know? But half the time the cameras are not even working.
Yeah. And the good news for you is you found a place. You were on the streets now for 3 weeks, but you just recently found a place. Where were you able to get a place?
Harriman, out in Harriman, way out there.
What are you gonna do out there?
Just write stories and get my life together so I can go back to LA.
That's where you want to go.
Yeah, that's where I'm from, LA.
Yeah.
Gotta go back home because my brother's been dead for 8.5 years, almost 9.
All right.
So I need to find closure, and I have to find closure when someone dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I need to do.
But your kids are here in Salt Lake.
Yeah, they're in Daybreak. They got adopted out.
But you're still in contact with them. So
No, I mean I haven't been on the platforms, like Facebook and stuff, to let them know I'm alive still. So
you said your son was in the Midvale shelter with you. Is that
yeah,
he's an older?
yeah, he's 14 now. 14, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when he was like I think he was 6 and my daughter was like 3 when I was there at the Midvale shelter, the new one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you stayed there just recently for a little while.
It was in 2017. I stayed there for a month and a half.
Being there for their memory thing.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. The thing that I've gotten to know Kelly pretty well over the last few years. Her story is she became homeless after a bad car accident. She had an abusive husband. She was with her children in the Midvale family shelter for a while, and then her children were taken away from her by DCFS. That's not an uncommon story. Many of the women on the street have had children removed. She does not want to take too much ownership over when she started using drugs, other than everybody would use drugs in her predicament, it being homeless on the streets. I don't know when she used them, but it was like it's obvious her life was just spiraling down, 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 and it only got worse and worse and worse until she found herself on the streets, homeless, drug addicted, due to a bunch of bad circumstance, probably as well as a bunch of bad choices. How do you stop people as they're spiraling down from becoming homeless drug addicts? I mean, is that something the state legislature is working on?
We have talked about, and I don't know there's any action by the legislature right now, but as a board, we have been talking about the need for more preventative kinds of activities so that we can catch them before they get on the street. There's some who end up homeless and in despair, and then they start self-medicating by taking drugs, and it just leads to more addiction and a worse outcome. There are some who start out with the drugs, and it leads them to lose their job and their home and their car and their family, and then they end up on the street. And so it was the drugs that precipitated that homelessness. And so you see both scenarios. But if someone, in either case, we need to get, if someone is addicted to drugs and then ends up on the street, we need to get them into treatment right away, before the downward spiral. If someone has a life crisis, car accident, or health problem, they lose their apartment or their spouse or their job, and they end up on the street, we need to get to them right away.
Yeah. because they have a real good excuse to use drugs.
Yeah.
And I honestly, after going through a really hard period in our lives during COVID, I kind of get why you self-medicate, because you kind of check your brain out of the cycle of going through your problem again and
Yeah.
again and again,
Yeah.
which you usually can't you solve all your problems, especially with just your own mental faculties. And
But that's why we need to get them into a shelter right away. The ideal is nobody should be on the street. We get them into a
you
low
get them
barrier
into
shelter.
sober living before they start using.
Yes. And then we get them into a low barrier shelter right away. We get a case manager in there who can do an assessment and say, okay, you've got, some issues here. Let's get a plan to deal with those. We'll get you employment. We'll get you that surgery that's preventing you from getting a job or living independently.
It seems like the norm is life spirals downward. You find yourself isolated. You're isolated on the streets. There's a community of drug addicts that will commiserate with you. You start using drugs. You feel a little better. You've got a community now. Instead of there being a community to help you, this community is going to bring you down further. And at least you're not isolated anymore. Kelly's worried that in Harriman she's going to be isolated and it's going to be tough.
Well, you need it. You need to belong to a community, and so people will go to wherever they're accepted. And if they're accepted by this group in a homeless encampment, that ends up being their community. Sad enough, that often results in abuse and physical and sexual and all kinds of abuse.
Yeah.
And it just leads you down into a downward spiral.
Well, we'll take another couple of questions and then.
Rachel says the process Jim is describing is currently going on at all the homeless resource centers, low barrier shelter coupled with case management and other supportive services.
So Rachel's saying that they are getting the care they need at the shelters. I suppose if she has that experience and she's seen it, then that's great. And to be fair to both sides, probably the ones who are most vocal to me are the ones who are not getting the care they want and who are bitter about that. Because I've heard the opposite. I've heard the shelters, a lot of people get their stuff stolen, so they choose to camp outside. They don't feel safe in the shelters. I hear that a lot. But if the majority people are getting great care, then that's great. And
And Vandemus says tiny homes are not significantly less expensive than apartments, FYI. And the vast majority of the costs are staffing, not actual facilities.
yeah.
Addressing Utah's terrible eviction laws would prevent a ton of homelessness if we had enough beds.
Do you find that? Do you think do you think we have terrible eviction laws here in Utah?
I haven't looked at that issue.
Yeah, I know, I guess compared to other states, I think we are more landlord friendly perhaps than other states, but I know you have to give 30-day eviction notice. There has to be a reason. You have to have a court order. But I don't know what other legal changes could make it better. I'm a landlord, so obviously I'm a little bit biased.
If you're not paying your rent, I don't know
Yeah.
why the landlord should have to cover that cost.
Yeah, I'm a low level landlord. I've only got a few units, but I had a drug addict in one of my units who completely trashed my house, and I couldn't evict her, but I convinced her son to convince her to get out. And then I had to completely remodel the house, property, and I spent a fortune on it. So I don't know.
Pink Mama's Addiction says, I would love to talk more about this. I think some of us who have lived deeply in this environment could help others understand how it really is out there.
Well, DM me, Pink Mama's Addiction. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to have you on because I agree. I like to have people who both are helping write policy and who also have lived experience, because I think you need both. I think you absolutely need you need to bring to the table the folks who have the most knowledge and experience with what's going to be the best for everyone. So I think, anyone else?
And Vandy says, I recommend the housing section of Utah Investigative Journalism for more on our eviction laws.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah, I know Eric really well, and probably should have him on to talk about that. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you so much, James, for coming on.
I think it's really important that we continue this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know all the answers. I don't think you do. But we can't get to a solution unless we just keep talking about it
Yeah.
and not condemning any individual or program or
No,
group, but just engage in a conversation and find our way to some good solutions.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all that you do and all that you're coming forward to talk about this. I know it takes courage to come on and talk about the problems that exist, because I think that is the only way you come to solutions. You gotta address the problems. So thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to see the recorded version, the whole podcast, go visit us at utahstories.com or our YouTube channel. Like and share, subscribe to this channel if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you want to be a bigger part of Utah Stories, go subscribe to our free digital newsletter. If you want to become a member of Utah Stories magazine for $10 a month, we'll send you Faces of Utah magazine. This is an entrepreneur success guide in Utah. It's a lot of the most successful family businesses profiled in the pages. It took us 16 months to create this book, and it's our gift to you if you become a member. We've got stories about leadership, about amazing local businesses who've created awesome businesses here in Utah. We've always been featuring the voice of local Utah here, and your support of the program helps us do that and helps us create more podcasts like this one. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Clark's Auto, Utah's premier independent Subaru repair shop. Check them out online at clarksautofix.com.